Welcome to InsideTheHive.tv podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Umberto Boncristiani. In this podcast, we talk about the teachings of the most successful society in natural history, the honeybees. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner, an advanced beekeeper, or just curious about honeybees. Here, you'll find great conversations to educate and entertain yourself about this wonderful insect. From honeybee biology to how to make money with honeybees, you won't miss anything here. In this episode, I sit down with Dr. Sanford to discuss an article he wrote years ago that is still very relevant today. We talk about the ongoing conflict between beekeepers and honeybee researchers. What do beekeepers want and expect from researchers? What do researchers want and expect from beekeepers? It is a fascinating topic, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, Professor, welcome back. I'm curious to know why you want to talk about this subject specifically with me. There is anything related with because it's me and my relationship with academia?
Well, I think it does. I'm looking for a focus of this particular topic that we're talking about. I wrote an article on my website called What Scientists and Beekeepers Want. And that was something that I agendaed over a few years about trying to figure out what beekeepers and scientists were all about. And we put that in the show notes, that particular article that I've written up. And basically, if you boil it down to two things, beekeepers want results. Beekeepers want results of whatever studies are being done. Researchers want results, yes, but they're really interested in what? They're interested in publication. So sometimes that gets turned around, and so beekeepers have said in the past, all researchers care about is publishing. Well, they do care about publishing, but that's not the only thing, obviously. And then over time, then researchers say, well, beekeepers don't give a damn what we're doing. We're like, we need to publish so we get the results, and then they can understand and figure out what's going on. So that's kind of the gist of that particular article.
Professor, when did you publish that article? Because I think the things is still the same, and I've been in 3-4 universities so far, and I can attest to you that I would think anything changed since you published that article.
Well, it was published on my website. I suspect around 2017 or something like that. I'm not sure exactly. I have to go back and look to see.
Yeah, I think it is a constant battle. Decades ago, too, I remember my father, as a beekeeper, having issues with researchers in Brazil back in the day when I was, 15? My father was concerned when I started to go to the research area, and he was afraid that I was going to become one of those. That's the only you're going to become one of those scientists that say a lot of things but don't say anything. That's the.
Well, we're not going to we're not going to solve that problem in this podcast. But I think we do need to refer back to it on occasion. I think you're right about that. And so in my career, it's the same thing. Now remember that we're two different kinds of guys. You're a kind of a trained researcher, a trained scientist, and then you're doing publications and you're doing your write-ups and you're doing your website and whatever else. I come from another background. I come from what we call in the United States, at least, the extension background. The extension being the extension of information from research into usable information. And so that's part of the problem here in that sense that and these two things again, as mentioned, are a constant within the system. So we just have to deal with that.
Yeah, and I need to go. We need to go deep to try to understand the roots of that. The two sides have a point. The beekeepers are expecting something different from the researchers,
right?
And the researchers, I think sometimes they're too focused on their own game to understand what the beekeepers want or need or expecting from them. But most of the time, what the beekeepers are expecting from the researchers are not the researcher's job description. So they're trying to do things for them that they're not supposed to be doing. And it's a different game. And that for me was an opportunity for what I do today. Because I've been in there. When I come to the United States, I made a promise to my dad. I think you interviewed me on that I'm going to come to help the beekeepers and bees. And it was really hard for me to help the beekeepers the way they want and need, and at the same time playing the game to be an academic, to survive in academia.
Right.
That was impossible. It is impossible to do both. I need to decide which one I'm going to do it. So that's why we have, Humberto, two people on this podcast. You're I look at you as the research side of the equation, and I look at myself as sort of the extension side. I mean, we can't completely divorce ourselves from the two things we're talking about, but we can separate ourselves a little bit. So in my website, that's one of the things in my website that I'm looking at and trying to, and have developed as kind of expertise in doing, is trying to bring that research to a usable form, and then beekeepers can choose what they want. The other thing that's important to understand is, of course, that I'm a geographer, really, from sort of my academic background, and really beekeeping is really all about geography, in the sense that it's different everywhere you go. And so if you have certain things that are going on, they may not be applied somewhere else just simply because the geographic situation is different. That's exactly what I do on a daily basis, Professor. I have that lesson learned pretty well. Beekeeping is local. You need to do the experiments locally with the beekeepers to bring solutions that work for that specific person. So that's kind of my business model when I'm doing my private consulting. I knew for a fact that inside the academia, I would generate information, but that information will be useful for just a handful of people that know how to get that and translate for themselves. But it's very hard for a person that is not trained in science to translate that information to be useful for themselves. And that creates those expectations from beekeepers, and they start to be frustrated because they see a lot of information from beekeepers that they don't understand or don't know how to use for themselves, or information that at the end of the day is not useful for them in the specific area that they are. So it is quite challenging. And that's exactly what I do. I go to places and beekeepers hire me to do experiments that work for them. That's it. I generate information that works for them. And so far, so good. It's been challenging as a business model, but I'm happier doing that. It's fun to work with the beekeepers directly and companies that are trying to do the same, bring solutions for the beekeeping industry. And I wonder, in your experience, Professor, in so many years doing this, do you see anything that we can do to help more, to fill the gap of that bridge between how you can get that the scientist trying to do something more practical, if it is possible in the academic environment, and beekeepers perhaps try to educate themselves a little bit more in the scientific method to understand what the researchers are doing, and try to absorb the information that are useful for them, and not being expecting every single thing the researchers do is going to be beneficial to them, because that's never going to happen.
Right. I agree with that.
Do you see anything we can do to perhaps help with that? Something that you're doing this for so long.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we have to. It's very difficult because often the advice you give to beekeepers they don't take. From my perspective, that's something that you have to deal with, and I'm sure the scientist is the same way. They have certain things, and it doesn't take with a beekeeper either. So you really have to go back to the beekeeper and say, what is it? Where's the information coming from? And is it something that we can use and kind of go from there. Now, there are ways of doing that. There's that thing I wrote in my outline here a little bit about the history of beekeeping. We could start with what I call the federal labs.
Yeah,
federal labs. You're up there near Beltsville, and I guess your wife's working for Beltsville.
Yeah,
the Beltsville lab. So that's the classical beekeeping research was done in these labs, and we have now 4 of them now. I think we got Beltsville, we got Tucson, we got Baton Rouge, and what's the other one? I used to have to check. I got to go back on my notes. I don't remember either. Baton Rouge, Beltsville, Tucson, and Weslaco.
Yep,
Weslaco was the lab at one time, but not anymore. But those are the 3 anyway, and they will probably get in and out as time goes on. Tucson, Baton Rouge, Beltsville, and I think Weslaco was the one that just recently was retired. They don't do that anymore. And then there's the one for the one out in the West, which is for not for honeybees, but for stingless bees, other kinds of bees. It's done. I think that's in Logan, Utah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Professor, maybe we should explain a little bit of the role of those labs and the difference from these labs and academic labs, because there are differences that I think we should address. For example, those government labs, they have a budget every year provided by the government to do research, and specifically for honeybees, and to make those something useful for the industry. They're more directly related with the directly needs of the industry. And academic labs are more freedom of what they do. They are developing experiments to, for example, to answer broader questions about bee biology, or it's not something that could immediately be addressing something that is in need in the industry, but it's something that could potentially be exploring in the future. There is more freedom in academic labs than in the government labs that have specific issues which is to address problems in the beekeeping industry. So
they have to communicate too. They have to communicate with each other. That's part of the issue.
That's true.
So you're right about that.
But the goals are different, and people need to understand those goals, because sometimes they go to academic labs with the professor that is studying some basic biology of bees, just using honey as a model to something else, and start to point fingers to the guy that didn't bring anything useful for him, and the guy was just, this is not my job. I'm studying something.
Well,
yeah, that happens a lot.
Anyway, that if we talk about beyond the historical aspects of it in terms of the history, there also we have to go back to look at publications where the information is published, and so we haven't talked about yet the role of the so-called bee publications in the United States. That would be like Bee Culture Magazine, the American Bee Journal. Internationally, there's the International Bee Research Association. There's colos.org now that is a European outfit that isn't publishing so much. It doesn't have its own magazine, but it is a research outfit that kind of fits the mold of the European. And in my book that I wrote about, I went and visited those labs a little bit when I was in Italy and in France back in the 1960 and 1996 and so on. So that was part of my trying to figure out what, in fact, they were doing and how they were operating and so on. So we have to deal with that. So it's a complex thing. There's no question about that in terms of what is possible. What is possible. So that those, but beekeepers need to know about those resources, and they need to be kept up to stuff on that particular thing. The obviously ABJ, for example, and Bee Culture, they have their big encyclopedias of beekeeping that they publish every once in a while, and that's part of it too. So beekeepers need to have a significant library, in essence, of these kinds of publications.
Yeah, those magazines are very well established magazines. They are there for I don't know how many years, and you probably know them more than I do. I think it would be a good exercise here, Professor, to explain also the differences between those types of articles and scientific articles. Because I see beekeepers sometimes kind of confused when you said it's not published, and they said, yes, it is published. I saw it in the magazine, in the Bee Culture magazine. So there is this confusion about the different kind of articles and publications. Maybe we should go and talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, there's no question about that. That is something worth looking at. I was trying to think. The Economist magazine way back when, I don't know exactly when, they talked about. I have to actually go to my website to see some of this stuff. Maybe I should do that.
Yeah, and we can go there, and I can start to explain here what the peer review magazine research article is. In the scientific method, it's something mandatory. Is the data need to be analyzed by many different people. In a scientific method, there are when we are doing the experiments to try to answer a scientific question, there are biases. There are a lot of things that our brain cannot control and can bias ourselves to different directions. And part of the scientific method is to find a system that defend the data from these biases that we cannot control as human beings. So part of the scientific method is to have your data analyzed by other researchers from the same field, people that are specialized and do similar things, so they can catch you and whatever you're writing or whatever analytic methods you're using to try to get rid of those biases and publish the best version of the interpretation or the data analysis that you can possibly get from that, or find the mistakes that completely invalidate the data that you're trying to publish. So it is very important in the scientific method. When we, for example, myself, I finished a study of 2 years and put the data together. I need to send this data to a journal, and this journal is going to have an editor, a kind of judge, and this judge is going to send for 2 independent observers, reviewers, which are specialists in the same field, that's going to criticize whatever I wrote, whatever methods I used to analyze the data, and anything else they can possibly see in those articles. So there is this vetting system, which is very important in the scientific community before you publish something. However, in other magazines, this vetting system doesn't exist. There are not peer-reviewed magazines or articles. So to just go there and the editor decide by himself is going to publish or not, based on many criteria that sometimes we don't even understand. It's not a scientific criteria. It's more something that is going to be more related with what the viewer of that specific magazine wants to hear or read. So they're more open. They're not verified too. So
yeah, but that's not just bee research, Alberto. That's all kinds of research.
Yeah,
and it's the same questions and whatever that we're talking about is available in all kinds. For example, this Economist article I talk about was talked about particular studies with different kinds of people and so on, and basically well-designed studies with little research bias has only 85% of being right. They say that. Underpowered, poorly performing study has about a 17% chance of producing true conclusions. So that's the kind of thing that is out there, and is to some degree you have to determine whether they're right about that. But that's what they're publishing in the Economist. I think the Economist is a pretty good. This was published in 2005. To look at the failure or the successes of scientific publication.
There are problems in all those systems, Professor, and I think these are the discussions we need to be having, because people need to understand how those systems work so we can always, improve them instead of just reject all the systems we have in place. I think those discussions are very important. For example, me from the scientific community, I see a lot of problems with the systems and the editors and academics that have so much things to do. For example, I spend 1, 2, 3, 4 universities here in the United States doing bee research, and I something that bothers me a lot is how little amount of time the researcher, the head of the laboratory has to overview the students doing the research. It is mind-boggling because once you have your own lab, your mind completely focused to raise money to the university. You need to be writing grants and finding money sources, and very, very little of your time is spending on really in this critical process of the experimental design, of teaching the students how to do exactly what needs to be done, going in the field, the overview, make sure that things are being done correctly. It's very few amount of times, and I saw a lot of mistakes being made, a lot of problems, and I don't know how to fix that in the field. And with that thing, we create a data that then is going to be judged by other people in the same situation, and things start to accumulate. I think this is a problem we have with the system, because there are problems and mistakes and biases that's still going into the system. And beekeepers are really good to find some of those, being the person in the field 100% of the time, observing the bees. They can clearly see some things are wrong with some experimental design sometimes, and then start even more conflict. I don't know what you think about that, if you saw something like that when you were at the many universities that you worked at before.
Well, I think it's what we're talking about is standard kind of information that I don't know how to solve it. Can't really.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking
that, but we could talk about it, which is what we're doing, obviously. No, but that's the concept. And then my outline that I created a little bit here. Let's see if I can find it again. I talked about the one of the things that I talked about that really amped up honeybee research was 2006, when something called CCD, colony collapse disorder, made its appearance.
Yes.
At that point, there was I consider it to be a big shift in the research, who was going to do research and so on, because of that particular situation. We really still don't know what CCD really is. We got an idea. We got people that are talking about it and they've researched it and so on, but it's still out there as that's what created this kind of a new area for people to do research in the honeybees with reference to that particular, if you want to call it a disease or situation or whatever. And from that discovery in 2006, from that particular thing, that was by the way, if you know the history of that was created by a beekeeper up in the northeast of the United States who lost all his bees, and from that came colony collapse disorder. And then the new research outfits that came out of that would be one that we know about is what's called Project Apis M. That's and then Project Apis M now is cooperating with the National Honey Board, and they're doing a lot of great research. It's really good.
They are funding a phenomenal research, and I don't know if you know, I am covering a couple of those research articles in my channel, and Project Apis M right now is one of my collaborators. Yeah, so we will work together. So as you do your thing, you're also, you're in a way attempting to kind of come together with these two particular things we're talking about. And the other thing is Randy Oliver. I noticed that you've got something on your InsideTheHive.tv with a couple of interviews with Randy Oliver. Yes.
And he's scientificbeekeeping.org. Now, here's a guy who's a beekeeper, has some scientific training, and he's looking at this from a scientific area, and it's worth looking at his particular website and his activities, because again, this is a shift a little bit, because you've got a beekeeper who really is a scientist. And he's also doing up with you. That's the other aspect of it. He's a practical
for many years. Randy is a good friend for many years. I love Randy. We should clone Randy and make many Randy Olivers in different areas of the country, in different environments, because I think what he's doing is very good, and the research and results he's getting is very important. One thing that I always like to stress is it's very important for the area where he is, and that's being the problem with people trying to use the same protocols and results and trying to accommodate that for other environments and other bees, that sometimes get some problems. But I agree with you. I think Randy is a phenomenal example of how things should be done. He's a scientific guy. He has deep knowledge about bees. He's a beekeeper himself, and he's doing a phenomenal job. We should have many Randy Olivers in different locations of the planet. That for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. That would be a good idea. We do have a guy up here in Georgia, Bob Binney. I don't know if you've heard of him or not.
I know about.
And I think we should do maybe we should do some podcasts on these particular areas, and see what's going on with that, because we're kind of in a situation here where we got a lot of things going on, but I don't think we're going to have much without consolidating this particular areas and say we're going to have a podcast about Randy Oliver. We'll have a podcast about Bob Binney. We'll have a thing about Apis M. I mean, we could do that.
Yeah, we
can have all this together in one particular podcast. Yeah,
I would not be. We can invite Randy. We can invite anybody, Professor. We can even go there if you want to go to a trip. Let's
do what? Sure.
Let's hit the road at no places. I'd love to visit Bob and Randy and many other beekeepers that are out there that I would love to tell their stories. So let's plan to do this in the future.
I think, again, we could refer. You've already done some of this with Randy. I think you got a couple of interviews with him.
Yeah, I'm going to leave a link in the description of the video or the description of the show if you're listening in your podcast provider that you like. I'm going to leave the links of everything that we're talking about here. All the links are going to be there. So the website of Dr. Malcolm Samford, Randy Oliver's website, my one website, his book, everything is going to be there, so you can easily access everything we're talking about here.
Apis M, particularly.
Apis M and other.
Whatever you're doing with them, it's important that if you're doing something with them now, that'd be something that's currently happening. We could also maybe feature that as a podcast in itself.
Yeah. We can plan to do that ahead.
What we're doing here is brainstorming right now. We're not really.
We're changing subjects. We were changing subject a little, but that's fine. That's the good of this podcast without script. We like to do that.
That's right. We don't have a script. That's for sure.
We don't have a script. We'll go with the flow. But maybe
I'm see. Are we in this thing for about a half an hour now, or
no? We need half an hour. I don't know how much more time people are always going to be listening to us.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we might be in a position where we have to decide. Okay, we can continue this particular discussion. We started it off now.
Yeah, we started it off. So let's put this way.
Now we can use various kinds of things to try to figure out what's going on with that. Perhaps, I don't know. I'm not familiar with these podcast situations. I don't really know, what others are doing. But I'm looking. I've got some other references. We've got several other podcasts, by the way. Not the only podcast going on. You got the Kip Flodham's got his podcast. Jim Two's got his podcast. You know, there's several different people that have podcasts in different places, and that's something too that could be looked at.
Yeah, we can bring them to the show too to talk about things. So this is what I'm going to do then. Let's wrap this up here right now. Let's wait for more feedback from people. So if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment with some questions about that you got from this podcast, and then we can continue the next chapter based on those questions and your comments. Everything that you interact with us over there is gonna become material for us for the next episodes of this podcast. What do you think, Professor?
Yeah, I mean, you could spend a whole year on this kind of stuff and just basically look at it within the context of what we talked about today. Now examine specific instances of what we talked about that had problems, you know, that we were talking about within the context. Look at what people are doing, and go from there.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Ask any questions. We're gonna get all those questions and bring to new podcast episodes with answers from our private research we're gonna do independently here in the channel, myself and Dr. Sanford. And then based on your questions, we're gonna try to help out, bringing you some answers that we find around the internet or around our communities here.
Well, the other thing you could probably maybe explore is, instead of having just you and me on this podcast, if you could get like Randy Oliver on there, we could talk to him. There'd be three of us talking to this guy or something like that. I don't know if that's possible, but that's
it is. I can call Randy right now and invite him.
Well, that might be a little too much, but anyway,
that's good for our head. Yeah, let me see how Randy is doing. He's very busy and other things in his life. Let's make sure everything is fine. We can schedule. Yeah, let's bring everybody to the show. I have a lot of people who want to talk, and I want these people on the podcast with you on the podcast, because you bring a completely different angle of questioning and background that is different from me, and I think it's going to complement a lot what I'm doing here in this show. So one more time, Professor, it's always a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, great talking to you. I think we're just brainstorming now. So that's and I'm not happy with brainstorming. That's something that makes quite a difference. If you do it for a period of time, you do come up with results.
Yep. So this podcast is very interactive. We want to hear from you at home, and don't be afraid to reach out to us and ask questions, and we're going to bring answers in this podcast. Professor, anything else you want to add before I wrap this up?
No, I think that's pretty good. I think, again, as I say, we're kind of fumbling around a little bit to try to figure out what we would go for the future, and I think that's what we did. We brainstormed, and we got some ideas, and we get up some ideas from people that are looking at this, and we kind of go from there.
Yep, sounds good to me. And your first subject, I think it was a very good one, very important one, this relationship with beekeepers and researchers. And I'm sure we're going to do a lot of other episodes on this same subject, because people are going to ask us a lot of questions, for sure.
All right.
So thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. InsideTheHive.tv, the show about bees. See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
InsideTheHive.tv podcast is brought to you by our fans on Patreon. On Patreon, you can access all episodes before anybody else and exclusive content, like behind-the-scenes videos, live streams, and more. If you want to learn more about honeybees and help me to make more content about honeybees to everybody, please visit patreon.com/InsideTheHive.tv and join our community.